Kia ora tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Aotearoa te manga ko te matuku te moana no tamaki ahau. Ko tā Rob tōku papa, ko Fenwick tōku whānau, ko Izzy tōku ingoa. Kia ora, my name is Izzy and I am the Engagement Director for the Aotearoa Circle. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about the mahi, the work stream currently underway with the food system. You can see a couple of unfamiliar names here, which is great. And so for those unfamiliar, I will do a quick introduction of the Aotearoa Circle. The Aotearoa Circle was founded 2 years ago and is a voluntary initiative bringing together leaders from the public and private sectors to investigate the state of our natural resources and to commit to priority actions that will halt and reverse their decline. And in a country like New Zealand, you know, there are very few other countries more dependent on our natural resources, both for the well-being of our people and our economy. So our food system is a really fantastic example of that. The session today will be a high-level update and walkthrough of the process that the food system mahi has been on over the last few months. These sessions are an opportunity for the Circle to give visibility to our wonderful partners of the work happening away in the background. A little housekeeping, like I said, if you could all kind of be on mute for the majority of the session, that would be great, but please feel free to pop questions in the chat. We'll have someone monitoring that. And then if we do have some time at the end, we can unmute you for some questions then. Also, always keen for feedback after the session. So if there's anything that you want to give feedback on or anything you'd like to know more about in any sort of future webinars around what the Aotearoa Circle is doing or what it's planning to do in the future, please let us know. But for now, sit back and enjoy the update. So this session is particularly special to me for a couple of reasons. One, I am usually just the host and interviewer of these sessions, but in this food mahi, I'm actually part of the Secretariat team as well. So I'll be taking us through the session with my colleague Daniel. Kia ora, Daniel.
Kia ora, tata.
The other reason this mahi is special is because my family is a part of Aotearoa's food system, producing some of Aotearoa's most delicious and sustainable oysters. So I feel particularly connected to the challenges and opportunities that Aotearoa's food system faces. So the Secretariat for this work stream is made up of two parts. One is KPMG, mainly being led by Ian Proudfoot and Jack Keys. And they led the first few months of this mahi, and they'll also be developing the output. And then we've also got DNA as part of the Secretariat, which is a design thinking and human-centered design research agency, which Daniel and myself work for. And we have been developing and facilitating the many dialogues and consultations that are going into this mahi. In fact, we had a 2-hour session just this morning talking with people from within Aotearoa's food waste and food rescue space. I think in the first week of our dialogues, Daniel and I did close to 30 hours of conversations and kōrero with people within the food system. The outputs that we're working towards are a roadmap for action, which is identifying the action needed from government, from the public sector, the private sector, and civil society, and the activity needed from those three to work together in certain spaces as well. And for those of you who are familiar with the Aotearoa Circle's work, the Sustainable Finance Forum roadmap is a kind of a good comparison. The other output is a report really defining the purpose and values of Aotearoa's food system. What do we want it to do, and how do we want it to be underpinned? So I'm going to share my screen now, take you through a few slides. Nice. So taking us back to the very beginning of where this work came from, early last year, sort of at the tail end of our first COVID lockdown, the Aotearoa Circle held a CEO summit, which I think quite a few of you might have attended. And the purpose of that forum was really to identify some areas where when it came to Aotearoa building back post-COVID, there might be some, unintentional negative consequences to certain systems if we didn't call them out now. And one of the systems that was really identified was the food system. And one of the outputs of that conversation on the day, or one of the suggested initiatives, was really a need for a national strategy for food, a national strategy that was going to take us towards a productive, sustainable and inclusive food system. So there was a report generated from that forum, the Fenwick Forum report, I believe, and there's some more detail into the outputs of that, including some of the things that came out in regards to the food system. But a national strategy was a main pillar of that. And the Aotearoa Circle took that and said, yep, that is important work and we will take that on. And while the Circle's kaupapa, has really been about restoring and reversing the decline of New Zealand's natural resources and our natural capital, we couldn't look at the food system and not take on the full extent of it, even though there were areas of it that weren't about our natural resources, like food insecurity. We were going to take a whole system approach to this. So that included the societal issues, the food security issues, health issues, and more. But we knew that we needed to look at the system as a whole. So we put together a leadership group, and taking on a system like the food system, where there are so many areas and challenges like health and societal issues, we knew we needed a really diverse leadership group as well to reflect the actual food system that we were working within. So we've got Rangamati Ahuia and Matt Pritchard chairing the work stream. We've got Angela Clifford, who's from Eat New Zealand, which is a collective of New Zealand chefs, producers, media, tourism, event operators, working on a national platform to promote best food and culinary opportunities in New Zealand. Boyd Swinburne, who's a professor of nutrition. Emmeline Afiaki, who represents the Pacifica community and is doing lots of grassroots enterprises. Jenny Webster Brown from our National Science Challenges. Leanne March from AgMart, which is Agriculture and Marketing Research Development Trust, to invest in initiatives to encourage innovative thinking within New Zealand's primary sector. Martin Swinburne from Ministry for the Environment, Paul Harvey from Fonterra, Rob Hewitt from Silver Fern Farms at Farmlands, Trish Malcolm from the Zero Hunger Collective, which brings together communities, producers, retailers, philanthropy and government to build mana enhancing solutions to food inequality in New Zealand, and Whai as well, who's chair for Ngāti Porou and Seafood Group. So a really diverse leadership group, which we did to really hold us accountable to all of the areas of the food system as we went into researching and designing the outputs and exploring those challenges. The other big decision that the leadership group made early on in this work was to really base it in a Te Māori framework. And this was really a no-brainer when we think about the Māori worldview, where it is the responsibility of humanity to care for the environment, and its food, it's what it produces will then care for humanity. So with that, being an essence of the Māori worldview, we knew that a framework embedded in that was going to give us the best outcomes for New Zealand's people and its environment. And there are three key elements of this framework: mana o te whenua, mana kai, and mana o te tangata. Mana o te whenua talking about the environment and the natural energy of the environment, and really talking about having respect for the environment. Mana kai talking about food and sustenance from food, and that really being the products that come from the land, and how do we best use those. And lastly, mana o te tangata, which harvesting and fair distribution, and within that fair distribution, really talking about what is our commitment to people and how can we ensure that all New Zealanders are fed well. So really talking about caring for people. So caring for the environment, caring for food, and caring for the people were the three sort of underpinning foundations of this framework. And this is the framework as it currently stands, and it was developed with some iwi kaumātua, and it's also been a part of the dialogue. So whilst this is what it looks like now, part of the conversations we've been having is, what does this mean to people? What's missing? How could it be used? So don't necessarily hold this as a finished product. It's definitely still a work in progress. And the key thinking within this is that it is through manakai that we gain long-term sustenance for planet and people. So in a food system that reflects this framework, we will gain long-term sustenance for people and planet.
And I'll just add to that, there is a lot of weight to that one as well behind it. There's a whole document for the framework which kind of outlines more of the context behind this. And we kind of, Izzy and I, along our journey, started to see this as being a vision, and it is really beautiful vision for what our food system can be, which it's not now, which was a really good platform for us to start thinking about, okay, well, why are we not here? What is stopping us from getting here? And if all of these elements exist and we want these to exist, what do we need in order to bring that to life?
Thanks, Daniel. And if anyone is interested in looking at more of the detail, I'll make sure that we send out both this slide pack and the slide pack that accompanies this framework, but also there's quite a bit of information in this space on the Aotearoa Circle's website under the Manakai section. But at a high level, I'll just sort of go through some of the detail on this. Anyone who's familiar with a Māori worldview will know that it's quite hard to explain some of the depth of the concepts here, so I'm not going to do it any justice, but we've only got a limited amount of time. But the tuakana-taina element is really recognizing the elder-junior relationship between the environment and people, and that in that respect, humanity is the junior in that relationship, and we need to show the senior, the environment, the respect that it deserves. Ngā is really around a collective mindset and how do we share the joint responsibility needed to have an effective, sustainable and inclusive food system. Mātauranga around the knowledge, wisdom, technology and innovation needed to enable that system. Manaakitanga, talking about our hospitality and generosity. How do we make sure that we feed our people first and then also look at the rest of the world? Rangatiratanga, talking about te tiri o te waitangi and how we will honour that. And that is also a guiding principle of this work, especially when we are embedding the work in this framework and leveraging these concepts. We really also needed to be committed to the respect needed in that space as well, and how can we ensure that the food goals that we're aiming towards are also helping to achieve the societal goals in that space. Ahaha, which is the economic benefits from the food system and ensuring that some of the prosperity generated from the food system is put back into the food system to redistribute wealth, reinvest in the innovation needed to make the system more sustainable and create employment opportunities for our people. Tikanga, which is looking at the processes and ensuring that there is respect for the environment, respect for kai, and respect for people in the processes that are underpinned within our food system. Haora, which is the well-being from our food system, nutrition, happiness, and connection. And lastly, atua, which is the connection of food and recognizing that it is food that gives us, the distinctive traits of quality and richness from the produce of our beautiful country. So after spending quite a bit of time understanding that framework, we looked at what are the objectives that we would need to set for ourselves that would get us to a world that really reflected that manakai. And these objectives...
Izzy, could we zoom in there? Sorry, I've just got a comment. If we could zoom in, that would be great. Just a little bit.
Tell me if I'm zoomed in too much, too little.
That's good. That's perfect.
Okay, cool. So we set really visionary objectives, giving ourselves an ambitious goal to work towards, and then creating some indicators for success. So how would we know as we tracked incrementally towards these objectives, towards the vision of what we'd like for our food system? And then which of the elements of our framework are reflected within these objectives. So objective 1, there is equal access to healthy, nutritious kai, the knowledge that enables healthy kai choices, and the support needed for kai sovereignty, with indicators for success being healthy, nutritious, quality kai is affordable for New Zealanders. Aotearoa reports an increase in food security for all communities. Tangata whenua, people of the land, have greater kai sovereignty, and Aotearoa reports a decrease in food-related illness. Our second objective, kai and the resources taken to make it are shown the utmost respect from farm to table and beyond. And the potential indicators of success for this is a coordinated movement is created amongst Aotearoa's kai consumers, producers that fights for mana kai through tikanga within our food system. Aotearoa's food system operates on an efficient circular economy. Aotearoa's food surplus is utilised and redistributed, and food waste is managed and reduced. Objective 3, there is a sustainable and restorative approach to the environment across Aotearoa's food system. The indicators being that Aotearoa's food system understand what is required from them to have a restorative approach to the environment. Aotearoa's food system stakeholders are enabled and supported in transitioning to a restorative approach to producing kai, and Aotearoa's food system has a restorative impact on our natural resources. Objective 4, the value of Aotearoa's kai and the resources sacrificed to produce it is recognised, celebrated, and maximised to its full potential. The indicators of success for this being Aotearoa's food sector maximises the value generated by the resources used. Aotearoa's food system recognises the cost to its natural environment in the way it values kai internationally. Aotearoa's international food brand is recognised and valued as high quality and sustainable. And the value of Aotearoa's land is recognised and reflected in how it can be used. And our final objective, objective 5, the prosperity generated by Aotearoa's food system sustains the entire ecosystem, including the environmental needs, the human needs, and industry needs. And the indicators of success for this being that prosperity from the food system will include reinvestment in sustainable food research and development and employment opportunities for New Zealanders. Prosperity from the food system will include restoration of the environmental damage caused by the food system historically. Aotearoa recognises the role international trade plays in a prosperous Aotearoa and creates sustainable and resilient trade policies. And Aotearoa's food system balances the economic gains of exporting homegrown produce with adequate supply to meet domestic needs. So those are our sort of guiding vision statements and the indicators that will help us know how we will get there. With those objectives being so visionary, we really knew that we needed to ground them in some tangible indicators that would help us understand how we were going to do it and what we would begin to see as we moved towards this ideal state. And these objectives and indicators were some of the things that we really leveraged in the dialogues we were having, exploring what we need from who to make those indicators happen. The other thing underpinning those objectives and indicators are our guiding principles. And one of the things that we knew we would need these guiding principles for is in a system like the food system, we knew we were going to come up against tensions. And boy, have we done that. So we're going to talk to that a little bit towards the end, but there are so many tensions within the food system. So we knew we needed some guiding principles when it came to making some decisions or trade-offs on what we were going to determine would be a key priority when in some instances it wouldn't always be a win-win. So those guiding principles are: we will take a whole of system approach. We will consider the potential impact of our recommendations on the end-to-end system. We will honour Te Tiriti o Te Waitangi and work in partnership in applying tikanga values. We will be mission orientated. So this is really focusing on the action needed and reflecting the true urgency of some of the challenges facing us in our food system. And we will ensure that we don't duplicate effort and leverage other initiatives, which we'll talk to in a second. And that's also the mission oriented is also why we really lean towards creating a roadmap for action rather than just creating another strategy or another report. We will balance ambition and pragmatism, and that's sort of looking again at our objectives and our indicators. How can we be really ambitious in the vision statements or objectives we want for New Zealand, but balance that with some pragmatism in terms of indicators for success and the action that's going to be needed to enable those. And ensure a just transition. So embody a really long-term mindset and think about what are the implications on the recommendations that we're suggesting on the future generations of Aotearoa.
And I think on that as well, it's good to call out because we have heard through the dialogues as we go along, oh, there's these other work streams, there's other work happening across the system, which Izzy will talk to a little bit in a minute. But I think the thing that does differentiate this from the other work, which we're seeing more and more as we progress on, is that we will take a whole of system approach. We've really noticed that there is a gap, there's something fundamentally missing and looking in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, at food from that level, where we're incorporating all of these different sectors, different aspects, different people, and looking at it as kind of a one system, one country approach, and seeing, okay, what do we need to do and what can we do collectively to create some wider change and change at scale.
Nice. So yeah, taking on that whole of system view and also the idea that we'll leverage other initiatives. One of the first things that we did, and again, this particular piece is still a work in progress, is started to look at what is all the activity and action and research already happening within the food space, knowing that there are pockets of greatness everywhere, but how can we take a whole of system or a more coordinated look at this, and even ensuring that in our roadmap we are just sort of recognizing or pointing towards activity or initiatives that are already happening, and that might be the whole recommendation is in itself is just more awareness or more activity driven towards some things that are already great in those spaces. And then where there's gaps, you know, we will determine the appropriate recommendation for those spaces, but really wanting to leverage and bring a coordinated approach to what's already happening. And you can see from this map that there is lots happening in certain areas, and, you know, what would it look like to have a version that had everyone singing from the same song sheet, or we could see, you know, where we could potentially redistribute some effort in some areas to ensure we were getting a holistic look at what was needed across the space. So this particular activity is still, as I said, certainly a work in progress, and one of the things that we're looking for from the wider food sector is to call out or acknowledge some really great initiatives or activities that are happening in these spaces that we think should be part of the roadmap. So there will be an opportunity for you or any colleagues that you think could contribute to this to share activities and initiatives that we think should be part of this roadmap or inform part of this roadmap. And as I move on to the next slide, I'll also say that, you know, we really recognized that at this point in this work, we can't talk to everyone or look at everything. So we have mapped to a degree the ecosystem, and we've done a lot of work to understand the current activity happening, but we have also created a survey which is on the Manakai site within the Aotearoa Circle website to start being able to distribute it more broadly to get as much insight from as many people as we can. But looking at the getting representation across the system, this was actually quite a learning experience for Daniel and I as well, when we first started kind of mapping this and thinking about how the system has sort of holistically been mapped, looking at the circular process of produce to process to market to consume and dispose, and looking at how that did or didn't work, or how that might have reflected a system that we knew wasn't working as well for us as it could, and what might a map look like, where we looked at, you know, where were there the greatest areas to make change in terms of respect and impact on our whenua, make the biggest change in terms of implications on our people, our tangata, and on our kai. So instead, we sort of decided to map it looking at it like this. And what are all of the sort of subcategories or sectors within each of these elements that needed to be understood or spoken to gain some of those big picture thinking, or identify the opportunities and barriers within each of these areas. And again, looking at this, we knew that we could never map the reality of New Zealand's food system. It's so complicated that there was never going to be an accurate picture of that. So what else did we need to create to supplement it, which was this survey that we've created that I'll be sending to everyone on this attendance list as well.
And really, this was an activity to ensure that when we do go out and engage, and when we do the dialogues, we're not oversaturated in one area. So we're not getting too many voices from one part of the system. So that was really, this was a means to an end in terms of ensuring that we are having diversity across the engagements that we have. Which was a challenging task, as Izzy said, and we know that not everyone would have been engaged at this round, which is why the survey is so crucial, and then also further engagements as well. But we do feel from the dialogues that we've done, and we've done quite a lot today, we are getting the different views coming out. And as Izzy said, there's a number of tensions which are coming up, which we'll talk to today. Which are really interesting and fascinating, but we also are seeing the commonalities across groups, and definitely some things that we can easily work on together, and in those harder things where we will have to make some decisions.
Well, thanks, Daniel. So the other thing that was kind of working against us is that we started working on this in lockdown, and we're still in lockdown, and so we've been at the mercy of Zoom in terms of the conversations that we've been able to have. But the next step of this was really starting to design those conversations and understand what is the purpose of going to conversation or going out to the stakeholders within the food system to design this. And we know and believe that co-design and co-creation is going to have the biggest impact, and the more times that we can understand how public sector, private sector, and communities can work together, or where one is really needed to lean in, the better. So we designed some dialogues, and the intent of those dialogues were to understand the realities of the food system. It was one thing for anyone to go away and write a roadmap without really understanding the realities of people within that system. To understand some of the differences and similarities of a system, and that's really come through in spades in terms of the tensions. One of the things that we found really interesting is that in some sessions, in every session, we've asked attendants to describe the food system to us in a word or a sentence. And in some sessions, it's broken, and in other sessions, it's thriving. So there are huge differences within the system that we've heard. Understand the key challenges, identify current blockers and existing science and knowledge that we can leverage, and really uncover the roles that are going to be required to enable that change. So getting into the level of detail where we can say it is the responsibility of these people or these groups to make those changes. So one of the caveats before I move on is that, as I mentioned, Daniel and I are still in the thick of dialogues. So, we had a session this morning, we've got one tomorrow. We haven't started to unpack or synthesize what we're hearing. We're still just listening, but we, wanted to still be able to give this update and talk about what it is that we're driving towards in the process that we've been on. But we didn't want to get to this point without giving you all a bit of a taste of what we're hearing. So we are going to share a few things, but know that this isn't the end of the work that's being done, or by any means scratching the surface of the insights or opportunities we're going to get to, but we thought we'd just give a taste of some of the things that we're hearing. So one of the big things that's come through is the tensions within the food system, or kind of almost a lack of awareness of the opposing view to your own in terms of the experience that you might have within the food system. So one really strong one that's come through is the different tension between the critical human needs and the critical environmental needs. Often if you've got a view of the critical environmental needs within the food system, there's a bit of a lack of awareness of the human needs in some of those similar spaces, and vice versa. The other tension we've been hearing is that food is not affordable versus food is affordable, but there's a different systemic issue that's in play here, like people aren't being paid enough. And I think in some of these tensions, there is a win-win or a truth to both, and in some there isn't. So while we might agree that, you know, there are people that definitely aren't being paid enough, there is also an element of food not being affordable in New Zealand. So how can we explore all of the tensions in what makes them true and then what makes them less true? We've also heard a lot about New Zealand's focus on exporting as what brings its prosperity, and the counter being that New Zealand's focus on exporting is what brings many of the problems to the food system. We've heard that, you know, top-down mandates are the things that are going to make the biggest change versus bottom-up solutions are the way to move forward. We've heard our agri sector is world leading and one of the least harmful for our environment, and the other being that the agri sector is sort of the thing that's creating the most damage to our whenua and is the least sustainable part of our food system. We've heard a lot about where responsibility sitting with producers or marketers versus responsibility sitting with the consumers, and that they have the real buying power here. So a lot of things to unpack in these tension spaces to start designing solutions for. And we've got a couple of themes that we've heard coming through. Again, we haven't even finished the dialogues, let alone started unpacking, but two major themes that we've really heard come through in almost every session is one, a real desire for collaboration. And what does it look like to have, you know, public and private sector from a local and national level collaborating on what the solutions look like? And we've heard this really strongly in the food security spaces and the environmental spaces, and when it comes to innovation and R&D for our food system. But we've also
and communities, that should be in there as well on that one, and communities, public, private, and communities, yeah.
But we've also heard that that collaboration can't happen without a mindset shift, that there's kind of a lack of trust between some of these players and from both sides of that story. So what is the mindset shift that's going to be needed to enable true and effective collaboration between those players to create changes for the food system? And then the second one is
just on that one before you, an interesting point as well, which you might find quite interesting on the innovation and R&D little tile there, that did come through quite strongly in all of the sessions, is that New Zealand is lacking in this space. I mean, we had some people say that we're beyond lacking, but it is kind of a theme that has come through very, very strongly, and the need in that space for public, private, community to really join together to see how can we amp that up, how can we start getting better at innovating, which is an interesting thing when you hear it, and typically people think of New Zealand as being quite innovative. So to hear that our food system isn't being innovative at all, it's quite an interesting thing to dive into. And we've definitely heard of some ways that we can kind of pull some levers and start creating change in that space.
Yeah, I think one of the strong things that came through in that one was when we look at the role that Aotearoa's food system plays, you know, we're a primary industries nation, exporting food is, you know, one of the biggest things that we do. And yet the investment that the government or private sector put back into innovation and R&D doesn't really reflect the importance or the magnitude of our food system for New Zealand, and how can we kind of shift that? And again, what's the mindset shift needed to better reflect how we think about the role that food plays in those spaces? So really interesting conversations. And the next one is a strong desire for more long-term commitments and strategies. You know, we've heard so much about ambulances at the bottom of the cliff. So how do we have less ambulances at the bottom of the cliff by having more long-term commitments and strategies? And I think, you know, we heard this coming through when it came to food insecurity, when it came to food-related illnesses, creating more resilient food systems, urban development, and how do we have sort of a long-term view on land space in those areas, environmental transitions, and education and capability lift. And I think one of the ones that we heard in our first session, which was a food insecurity group, was, you know, while there are government agencies that are supporting the immediate action getting food into tummies, there isn't like a long-term commitment to ending food insecurity in New Zealand that people can kind of tap into and enable. And so what does it look like for there to be a few less immediate tactile options for people, and a few more long-term strategies for transitions out of a country where our food-related illnesses is so high, for example. And again, when it comes to long-term commitments and strategies, it's critical that we have a co-design and collaboration needed to ensure that that is successful. So what are all the different elements that are needed to create true co-design and collaboration to inform those commitments and strategies, and how do we bring the different stakeholders together to enable that? So that's just a taste of some of the really strong emerging themes that are coming through. As I said, we're still in the thick of our dialogues, so there's still a way to go before we get into the synthesis stage or the development of the roadmap, but we are still holding true to a launch of March next year. So a busy couple of weeks for the Manakai Secretariat, and still calling out that this is a real first iteration roadmap, and that when it comes to the food system being so complex and really touching every human being as a critical element for survival, we know it's going to need a few rounds of feedback or development, since we haven't even really spoken to the eaters of New Zealand in that organics phase. It's mainly still been from some of those other sort of commercial or NGO or sector-based areas. So that is where we're at. There is, as I mentioned, opportunity for getting more insight and opportunities into this work stream as we move into the synthesis and roadmap development phase. We'll be sending out a survey that we'd love any of you to fill in or distribute to your networks to help us develop this mahi moving forward. That is the end of my presentation, but I can see we've got a couple of questions, Daniel. I haven't had a chance to read them yet. Should we open up the floor to questions?
I haven't got any here yet, but if we have people chuck them through.
Hi, it's Vicky. I just had a question about whether the presentation is on the website too. That is something that we can put up, although again, just with that caveat that some of the emerging themes and everything may change, but we can certainly put that information on there. The link that I have put into the chat gives much more detail on the Manakai framework, as well as the leadership group, as well as those updates. So anybody wanting a little bit more information can go on there as well.
Nice, thanks, Vicky.
And I believe the survey is on the site, is it? Izzy, for that one? There we go. Jess just chucked that link through to the survey there. I see we've got a comment from Mark. I'm just reading that one.
Kia ora, Mark. Just reading through your note in the chat, sort of talking about how our leadership group might reflect or determine what the solutions are likely to be. And I think, if this roadmap had been developed just with the leadership group in the room, maybe that would be the case. But we have taken this conversation out to the broader food system to ask them what their perspectives are. So while the leadership group, has guided some of the thinking and will, have a stake in their own game, Daniel and I have been leading the dialogues with as unbiased as we can approach to sort of empathy-based research to ensure that we are hearing from the communities and those most affected by the different sort of challenges or opportunities within the food system. And we will be synthesizing with KPMG what those solutions and outcomes look like. It won't necessarily be the leadership group. So rest assured that there won't be too much control in that space, but and
I think the actions will be so broad and diverse, as is the problem that we're facing, that some of it will be a need for more control in some areas and certain areas, and we're definitely hearing that. But then in other areas, we're hearing the need to release control completely and support local food movements. So it's a real combination of both. It's a grey zone that's really tricky, but we're definitely keen to continue to, our role has been listening throughout, and we will continue to put those voices through the process and ensure they're reflected.
Kia ora, Lisa, I got a question about the resource management reform and how much involvement Manakai Initiative will have in that. We have heard about the resource management reform in so many of the dialogues that we've had. So we are certainly going to be making some direct recommendations into that. And the example that you've given around replacement of first in, first served approach to water allocation is one we've heard, and also around land use. So we will be making some recommendations into that RMA. So thank you for your question. Zoe, did you think about adding environmental cost of food, which is indirect value, which environment paid for our food, but might not account in the food exporting, e.g. ecosystem services value? Absolutely. And I think we've got one of our objectives talks specifically to that, around the value of Aotearoa's kai and the resources sacrificed to produce it. Those resources being sacrificed, being those environmental ones, is recognised, celebrated and maximised to its full potential. So we need to properly recognise exactly that, the cost of the environment and the way we value food. So
definitely going through in the dialogues as well. What does success look like for Manakai in 2022? Izzy?
Kia ora, Samantha. Yeah, so what does success look like for Manakai in 2022? I guess, one of the things that's been quite hard to date is that one of the things that we want to do is enable all the players to kind of move towards a better food system for New Zealand, and that includes government, private sector, civil society, communities. And it's kind of hard to look at the government lens when there's no Minister for Food or Ministry for Food. So for me, one of the successes of this is that government can see a role or have a more integrated approach to how they service food in some of these spaces. That would be a big success for me. And the beginnings of a coordinated movement, like some momentum around people recognizing the impact of our food system having Manakai and taking on board some of the recommendations or actions that are going to be identified within this roadmap. And the roadmap, which hasn't even really been drawn out yet, so I don't want to go down too much solution, but really looking at what are some of the quick wins, what are some of the major cracks that we can begin to plug within our food system, but then also taking an intergenerational look at what would a food system look like in 20 years. And so, what do some long-term goals look like? But for 2022, maybe some of those low-hanging fruit being picked up.
Jenny, farmers and growers have been on dialogues. We've had them reflected through a number of different dialogues. Obviously, as we mentioned, we can't talk to everyone, which is a real shame. It's tricky when you're dealing with something so massive. But again, if people would like to contribute to the survey, that's a great means to do that, and you're all more than welcome to send that link through to anyone and everyone that you can think of. And we'll deal with the mass load of responses.
Kia ora, Jenny. I think Tim's going to be in one of the sessions, and we are talking to farmers as well. So we'll definitely see you. I think that's happening in early December, which is terrifyingly today. But kia ora.
And waste, we had a waste session this morning, which was really fascinating, interesting. It covered, touched on waste packaging and food waste as well.
Kia ora, Rod. Yes, Rod is asking about have major food sector companies and institutions engage on this, e.g. Fonterra, Dairy NZ, SFF, Beef and Lamb, Fed Farmers, Zespri, National Science Changes such as Land and Water. Literally every single one of those have been engaged in this work, Rod. So that's really good. Dairy NZ, SFF, Beef and Lamb, Fed Farmers are, I think, next week or the week after, although we had someone from Fed Farmers last week as well. We've spoken to Zespri. So yeah, we are getting engagement from everyone at this point, which has been really encouraging and reassuring that we maybe can take on such a big beast like this food system. So yeah, we have.
Alvina, that's a great question, and we are working to, at the moment, transparency on that those tensions are very much just come out. In the synthesis process, we'll get into that more, and we definitely have posed to the leadership group, and the leadership group are all thinking and working through what is our approach for some of those tensions, and what kind of stances are we going to take in some areas where we can't, like Izzy said, have a win-win scenario. So it's definitely something we consider of.
Yeah, and Delvina, that's one of the, also, benefits of having such a diverse leadership group, that there's already tension in the leadership group, healthy conflict, healthy tension. So we are always sort of navigating that, which sort of has its pros and cons. But I think it is going to hold everyone to be honest to, what is the best outcome for Aotearoa and its people, trying to remove yourself from the bias of your own positioning. So it's definitely a challenge, but we're going to be working through it. And Daniel and I don't have any agendas, so we're just going to keep, pushing through how can we get the best outcomes in these spaces.
Crossover or engagement with the Climate Change Commission. Izzy, you'll know more about that.
We haven't yet, but that is something that we're hoping to do. We were thinking that we might get a bit of an understanding about some of the recommendations and opportunities that we are going to be looking for before we go to them, taking on board the report that they've already distributed and sort of what is needed from their recommendations in these spaces. Wendy has got a question about, is there any plan to uplift digital capability in fresh produce world?
Question, Wendy. It came up in this morning's dialogue quite a lot. So that's definitely an area that we will be looking to reflect. Like it will come up in our synthesis and look at kind of what opportunities we can propose for the roadmap in that area. And interestingly, like in the digital side, likewise on data has been the key thing that's come up a lot across the system, across different areas, is the lack of data and the fact that we're not tracking our current state, so we can't make improvements for our future state. So there's definitely lots about that coming up.
Nice one, team. No more questions coming through. I'll give you all sort of one last opportunity to unmute yourself should you want to ask any final questions, but otherwise, thank you all for your time here with us today, and what is some very encouraging questions and support in the chat. So it gives us hope. There have been times where Daniel and I have felt pretty overwhelmed at the thought of tackling such a beast like the food system, but we've been making really great ground and uncovering some really useful and practical initiatives and opportunities to make really impactful change. So we're hopeful about the future and keen to keep as many of you involved in the work as possible. But I think that is all from us for now, unless anyone has any final questions. Thank you all for your time and energy today. Ka kite.
Aotearoa.